Joran had always dreamed of exploring the stars, but he never imagined it would happen like this, trapped in a cold, metal cage on an alien warship. The last thing he remembered was his ship, Pathfinder, traveling through deep space. Then came the attack. The HFY Empire, a race of tall, armored aliens with glowing eyes, had raided the ship. They killed some, took others, and destroyed the rest. Joran never even got a chance to fight. Now he sat in silence, watching the other prisoners. Most were humans like him, looking lost and afraid. Some were from other alien species, whispering in their own strange languages. Everyone had metal collars around their necks, glowing with a dull red light. Joran had seen enough sci-fi movies to guess what they were: shock collars to keep slaves obedient. The doors to the holding area slid open with a sharp hiss. A group of HFY warriors entered, their silver-black armor gleaming under the harsh lights. One of them, taller than the rest, held a glowing device and began scanning the prisoners. When the scanner beeped near a prisoner, they were pulled from the cage and taken away. Joran tensed as the scanner came closer. The HFY warrior stopped in front of him, looking at the device. After a moment, the alien let out a low grunt and moved on. Joran wasn't sure if that was a good sign or not. Finally, the scanning was done. The prisoners were sorted into groups. Some were taken away immediately, probably for hard labor or worse. Joran and a few others were led through the ship's long metallic hallways. Every corner was guarded by HFY soldiers, their weapons ready. There was no chance of escape. They reached a huge docking bay, where another ship waited. It was sleeker than the warship, with intricate golden patterns on its surface. Joran had no idea where they were going, but he knew one thing. Wherever it was, he was now a prisoner of the HFY Empire. The journey was long, and Joran had no way of knowing how much time had passed. The HFY didn't speak to them, and the prisoners were given just enough food and water to stay alive. The only thing Joran could do was observe. He noticed how the HFY moved, how they interacted. They were disciplined, following strict orders. But there was something else: pride. These aliens believed they were superior to everyone else. Finally, the ship landed. The prisoners were marched out into a massive palace made of black stone and golden metal. The air was warm, and the sky above was a strange mix of blue and purple. Joran didn't have time to admire the view. He and the others were led into a chamber, where a tall HFY in red armor stood waiting. Unlike the warriors, this one had an air of authority. "I am Overseer Vokren," the HFY said, his voice deep and commanding. "You are now servants of the HFY Empire. Your lives belong to us. Work hard, obey, and you will survive. Fail." He glanced at a nearby guard, who pressed a button on a small device. A prisoner nearby let out a sharp cry, collapsing to the ground. Joran saw the glow of their collar flicker before the prisoner weakly got back up. The message was clear: disobedience meant pain. Vokren continued, ignoring the suffering he had just caused. "You will be assigned roles based on your usefulness. Do not think of escape. There is nowhere to run." The prisoners were divided into groups. Some were taken to the kitchens, others to the gardens, and the rest to maintenance work. Joran was placed in the last group. It seemed the HFY thought humans were too weak for combat, but useful for fixing things. Joran's new life was exhausting. From the moment he woke up in the cold servant quarters, he was put to work. The palace was massive, filled with endless corridors, glowing technology, and towering statues of HFY warriors. Joran and the other servants had to clean, repair, and maintain the systems that kept the place running. But Joran wasn't just working, he was learning. He noticed how the HFY technology functioned, how the palace guards moved, and where the security was strongest. He memorized the paths they took, the way the doors opened, and even the symbols on the strange control panels. The other servants accepted their fate. They kept their heads down, afraid of punishment. But Joran refused to be just another nameless worker. One day, as he was fixing a damaged cooling unit, auxiliary technician muttered in frustration. "This human-made system is inefficient," the alien growled. "It always overheats." Joran, without thinking, replied, "The airflow is blocked. You need to reroute the vents." The technician turned, surprised. "What did you say, human?" Joran hesitated. Speaking out of turn was dangerous. But he had already started, so he continued. "The problem isn't the system, it's the way it's installed. If you adjust the vents, the heat will spread evenly." The technician narrowed his glowing eyes. Then, with a grunt, he made the adjustment. A moment later, the cooling unit's lights turned from red to green. The system was stable. The technician stared at Joran. "How did you know that?" Joran shrugged. "I just figured it out." The alien huffed. "Strange." Then, without another word, he walked away. Joran didn't know it at the time, but that small moment had been noticed by someone very important. High above, in the grand halls of the palace, a pair of golden eyes watched the scene unfold through a holographic display. The Empress of the Xilari, Velana herself, leaned forward on her throne. "A clever human," she mused, her lips curling into a small smile. "How interesting." Joran's days in the Xilari palace were long and exhausting. Each morning, he woke up in the servant quarters, a cold, metal room filled with rows of simple beds. The air smelled of oil, metal, and sweat. There was no comfort, no luxury, just work. From sunrise to nightfall, he was assigned to maintenance duty, repairing damaged systems, cleaning corridors, and making sure everything in the palace ran smoothly. The auxiliary overseers barely paid attention to him. To them, he was just another servant, another weak human, another insignificant being. But Joran was different. Unlike the other servants, who worked in silence, Joran observed. He studied the palace's security patterns, memorized the technology, and watched how the auxiliary interacted. He learned which areas were restricted, where the guards rotated, and how the alien machines functioned. Most importantly, he realized one thing. Auxiliary were strong warriors, but they lacked something that humans had: creativity. One day, Joran was assigned to the lower power chambers, where a massive energy core pulsed with blue light. The room was filled with auxiliary engineers working on the machines, adjusting controls and monitoring data. Joran was ordered to clean the vents near the cooling system, but as he worked, he noticed something troubling. A deep humming sound echoed through the chamber, growing louder with each passing second. Joran turned his head, watching as the energy core flickered. The cooling system was failing. He saw the problem immediately. The main exhaust vent was clogged, causing heat to build up. If it wasn't fixed soon, the energy core could overheat. Joran looked around. The auxiliary engineers didn't seem to notice. Either they were too confident in their technology, or they weren't paying attention. For a moment, Joran hesitated. Speaking out of turn was risky, but if the system collapsed, it wouldn't just damage the palace, it could kill everyone in the room. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "The cooling vent is blocked," he said, his voice clear but cautious. Several auxiliary turned toward him, their glowing eyes narrowing. One of them, a tall engineer with black armor, frowned. "What did you say, human?" Joran pointed at the flickering energy core. "The exhaust vent is clogged. That's why the core is overheating. If you don't fix it, the whole system will fail." The engineer let out a sharp, irritated sound. "Silence. You are a servant, not an engineer." Joran clenched his fists. He knew arguing was dangerous, but he also knew he was right. "I may be a servant, but I understand how air systems work. Just check the vent." The auxiliary engineer was about to dismiss him again, but then the energy core let out a loud crackling noise. Sparks flew. Warning lights flashed red across the control panels. The engineer's eyes widened. He turned and quickly checked the vent. A moment later, his expression darkened. Joran was right. The exhaust was blocked. With a quick command, The other auxiliary engineers rushed to fix the issue. Within minutes, the flickering lights stabilized, and the overheating core cooled down. Silence filled the chamber. Then, slowly, the lead engineer turned to Joran. "You saw the problem before we did," he said, his voice laced with surprise. Joran shrugged. It was obvious. For a moment, the auxiliary didn't speak. Then, with a grunt, the engineer nodded. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Joran exhaled, feeling his heart race. He had just taken a risk, a big one. But he had also proven something. Humans might be weaker than the auxiliary, but they were not useless. What Joran didn't know was that his actions had been noticed. High above, in the royal chambers of the palace, a figure sat on a golden throne, watching through a holographic screen. Empress Vailana. Her golden eyes were locked on the human servant who had just outsmarted her engineers. A slow smile formed on her lips. "Interesting," she murmured. That night, Joran sat on his bed, thinking about what had happened. The other servants whispered among themselves. Some were amazed that he had spoken out. Others warned him to be careful. "The auxiliary don't like it when servants act too smart," an older human warned. "They might see you as a threat." Joran understood the danger, but he wasn't going to stop. If there was one thing he knew about power, it was that intelligence mattered. He had no weapons, no strength, but he had his mind. And if the auxiliary thought he would just be another obedient worker, they were wrong. As he lay down, staring at the cold metal ceiling, a strange thought crossed his mind. Why had the Empress been watching him? The next morning, Joran was summoned. 2 auxiliary guards led him through the grand halls of the palace, past towering pillars and intricate golden statues. Servants and warriors alike turned to watch as he walked by. Finally, they'd reached a massive door engraved with glowing symbols. The guards pushed it open, revealing a chamber unlike anything Joran had seen before. It was the throne room. At the center of the room, seated on an elegant black and gold throne, was Empress Vailana. She was taller than any auxiliary he had seen, her dark armor shining under the soft blue lights. Her golden eyes studied him with a look of curiosity, as if trying to understand something about him. Joran swallowed hard. This was the most powerful being in the Empire. He had no idea why he was here, but he knew one thing. This moment would change everything. The Empress leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. "You are the human who saved my palace's energy core." Joran nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." A small smile touched her lips. Most humans fear speaking out of turn. "You did not." Joran met her gaze. "Because I knew I was right." The room fell silent. The guards stiffened. No servant spoke so boldly to the Empress. But instead of anger, Vailana's smile grew. "Clever," she mused. "Very clever." She studied him for a moment before standing up. "I will be watching you, human." Her voice was calm, yet it carried something else, something dangerous. Then she turned and walked away, her long cloak flowing behind her. The guards motioned for Joran to leave. As he stepped out of the throne room, his mind raced. The Empress had noticed him. She was watching him. And for the first time since being taken as a servant, Joran realized his fate was no longer in the hands of his captors. It was in his own. Joran had never been more confused in his life. One day, he was just another servant, fixing machines and avoiding trouble. The next, he was standing in the presence of the most powerful being in the auxiliary empire, Empress Vailana. And now, she was watching him. Ever since that day in the throne room, things had changed. The other servants kept their distance. Some whispered that he was cursed. Others said he was lucky. The guards no longer ignored him. Whenever he walked through the halls, he felt their glowing eyes on him. But the biggest change was the tasks he received. Joran was no longer assigned simple repairs. Instead, he was given problems. Difficult, frustrating problems. Broken systems that auxiliary engineers had failed to fix. Security protocols that had errors. even malfunctioning palace defenses. At first, Joran thought it was a test. Maybe the overseers wanted to see if he would fail. But as the days passed, he realized something else. This wasn't the overseers testing him. It was her. The Empress. Every solution he found, every problem he fixed, somehow made its way back to her. He didn't know how, but he could feel her eyes on him, even when she wasn't there. And then one day, she summoned him again. Joran followed the guards through the grand palace, his heart pounding. The last time he stood before the Empress, she had looked at him like an interesting puzzle. He had no idea what she wanted now. When the massive throne room doors opened, Joran took a slow breath and stepped inside. Empress Vailana sat on her golden throne, watching him with calm, glowing eyes. She was unlike the other auxiliary. Her presence alone carried weight, power, and something else Joran couldn't quite describe. She gestured toward a circular table in front of her. On it was a strange device, a holographic screen filled with symbols and data. "I have been observing you, human," Vailana said, her voice smooth but firm. "You are different from the others." Joran stood straight, his mind racing. He had no idea what to say, so he stayed silent. The Empress tapped a button on the device. A 3D image of the palace's security system appeared above the table. The map flickered, showing weak points in the defense. "This system is the heart of my palace," Vailana said. "It was designed by my best engineers, and yet it is flawed." Joran's eyes narrowed as he studied the map. He could already see the problem. The security nodes weren't connected properly. Some areas had too much coverage, while others had none at all. Vailana leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, human, can you fix it?" Joran hesitated. Was this another test? If he failed, would he be punished? Then he pushed the doubt away. He wasn't just a servant anymore. He was more. Joran stepped closer to the table, studying the map. "The problem isn't the system," he said slowly. "It's the structure. The way the security nodes are placed makes some areas weak and others too strong. If someone wanted to break in, they wouldn't even need to fight. They'd just slip through the gaps." The room fell silent. The auxiliary guards stiffened. No one spoke to the Empress like this. But instead of anger, Vailana's lips curled into a small smile. "Then show me how to fix it." Joran exhaled. He reached for the holographic controls, adjusting the security nodes. He moved some closer together, spread others apart, and balanced the system. After a few minutes, he stepped back. "There, now every section has equal coverage. If someone tries to break in, the alarms will trigger immediately." Vailana studied the map, her golden eyes gleaming. Then she chuckled softly. "Fascinating." She turned to one of her guards. "Send this design to my engineers. Have them implement it immediately." The guard bowed. "Yes, Empress." Joran blinked. "Wait, she's actually using my idea." Vailana's gaze returned to him. "Tell me, human, how did you learn to think like this?" Joran hesitated. Then he shrugged. "Humans have to survive. We don't have strength like the auxiliary. We don't have advanced technology. But we have to be smart. If we don't adapt, we don't make it." The Empress tilted her head slightly. "Clever. And yet you are still a servant in my palace." Joran felt a flicker of frustration. He had proven himself. He had fixed problems no auxiliary could. And still, he was nothing more than a worker. Vailana must have noticed his expression because her smile widened. "You wish for more." Joran stiffened. "I just want to be treated fairly." Silence filled the throne room. The guards looked shocked at his words. Even Joran couldn't believe he had spoken so openly. But Vailana only laughed. "Bold," she murmured. "Very bold." She stood from her throne, stepping down toward him. Joran forced himself not to step back as she approached. Up close, she was even more intimidating. Taller than any human, her dark armor glinting under the soft palace lights. She stopped just in front of him, studying his face. "You amuse me, human," she said. "I have seen warriors, rulers, and scholars, but none have surprised me the way you have." Joran swallowed hard. "Is that a good thing?" Velana chuckled. "That depends." She stepped back, returning to her throne. "From this moment forward, you are no longer a simple servant. You are now an advisor in my court." Joran's eyes widened. "Advisor?" Velana's smile was unreadable. "A test. Let us see how far your human mind can go." Joran felt his heart pound. He had come to this palace as a prisoner. Now he was standing as an advisor to the most powerful ruler in the empire. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. Empress Velana was watching him, testing him. And Joran was ready to prove that humanity was far more than just a race of servants. Joran still couldn't believe it. One moment, he was just another servant, working in the shadows. The next, Empress Velana had made him an advisor in her court. He knew what this really was. A test. The Empress was watching him, studying him. But why? What was she hoping to see? As he walked through the grand halls of the palace, he felt the weight of Silari eyes on him. The other advisors, high-ranking Silari nobles, whispered as he passed. The guards eyed him with suspicion. To them, he was still a lowly human, and yet he had been given a seat at the table. Joran's first meeting as an advisor was held in a grand chamber lined with golden pillars. The walls glowed with strange symbols, shifting and pulsing with soft blue light. A long curved table sat at the center, where Silari officials gathered in their elegant robes. At the head of the table sat Empress Velana, her golden eyes sharp as ever. Joran stood at the far end, feeling out of place. He had no title, no rank, just the Empress's curiosity. One of the nobles, a tall Silari with deep purple skin and a flowing silver robe, sneered. "This is a council of rulers and strategists, not a place for a mere human." Joran met his gaze calmly. "Then why did the Empress bring me here?" The room fell silent. The noble's expression darkened, but before he could speak, Velana raised a hand. "Because he has already proven himself more useful than some of you," she said smoothly. The noble clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Joran hid his surprise. "She defended me." Velana turned to a glowing projection above the table. It displayed a map of a distant sector in space. "There is a problem in the outer colonies. One of our mining worlds, Velkin, has been attacked by raiders. The security forces failed to stop them." The advisors murmured among themselves. The noble from before crossed his arms. "We should send an armada and burn the raiders' strongholds to the ground." Another advisor shook his head. "That will take too long. By the time our fleet arrives, the raiders will be gone." Joran listened carefully. The Silari were powerful warriors, but they always thought in terms of force. They saw problems as things to be crushed. He cleared his throat. "What if you didn't need to fight them directly?" All eyes turned to him. The noble scoffed. "And what brilliant idea does the human have?" Joran ignored him. He pointed to the map. "The raiders aren't attacking to destroy. They're attacking to steal. That means they have supply routes, hidden bases, and weak points. Instead of sending a fleet, why not cut off their resources, make it impossible for them to survive?" The advisors exchanged glances. The Empress tilted her head. "Go on." Joran continued, confidence growing. "Instead of chasing them, track where they sell the stolen goods. Find their black market connections. If you shut those down, the raiders lose everything. No weapons, no food, no reason to keep fighting. Silence." Then, to Joran's surprise, one of the older advisors nodded. "It's a practical approach, less costly than a full military operation." The noble who had mocked Joran scowled but said nothing. Empress Velana studied Joran for a long moment. Then, a small smile appeared on her lips. "Very well. We will use this strategy." She turned to the council. "Let this be a lesson. Power is not only about strength, It is also about wisdom. The meeting ended soon after, and the advisors left the chamber. Joran felt the tension as they passed him. He had just challenged the way they thought, and won. But he also knew this made him enemies. Later that evening, Joran walked through the palace gardens, his mind restless. The air was warm, filled with the scent of strange alien flowers. He had survived his first test as an advisor, but he knew there would be more. Footsteps approached behind him. Joran turned, expecting a guard. Instead, he saw Empress Vailana. She stood with her hands behind her back, her gaze unreadable. The glow from the garden lights reflected off her dark armor. "You did well today," she said. Joran hesitated. "I only said what made sense." Vailana chuckled. "And that is exactly why I brought you here." She took a step closer. "Tell me, human, do you know why I made you my advisor?" Joran frowned. "You said it was a test." Vailana nodded. "Yes, but it is more than that." She gestured toward the sky, where distant stars shimmered. "The Xilari Empire has ruled for centuries through strength. We have conquered, we have destroyed, we have won." Her golden eyes turned back to him. "But power alone is not enough. There will always be enemies stronger, faster, more brutal. I seek something more, something that cannot be broken by strength alone." Joran felt a chill. "You think humans have that?" Vailana smiled. "I think you have that." He didn't know how to respond. He was just a mechanic, a nobody who had been taken as a servant. And yet, the most powerful ruler in the empire was standing here, telling him he was important. The Empress turned away, gazing at the stars once more. "There are forces moving in the galaxy, Joran, greater than raiders, greater than armies. If the Xilari are to survive what is coming, I need something new." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "I need you." Joran swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if that was an honor or a warning. But one thing was certain, his life was never going to be the same. Joran sat in his new chambers, staring at the holographic maps floating in front of him. Just a few weeks ago, he had been a lowly servant, ignored by everyone. Now, he was an advisor to Empress Vailana herself. The weight of it all pressed down on him. The room around him was larger than anything he had ever known. The walls were lined with intricate golden carvings, and the soft glow of alien crystals filled the space, a far cry from the tiny servant quarters he once called home. But Joran knew luxury didn't mean safety. Not everyone in the Empress's court accepted him. Many nobles saw him as an outsider, a human who had no place among them. They would be watching, waiting for him to fail. And in the shadows, there were even greater threats. The next day, Joran was summoned to the War Council. As he entered the Grand Chamber, the Xilari nobles barely acknowledged him. Some whispered in low voices, others gave him cold looks. Empress Vailana sat at the head of the table, her golden eyes sharp as ever. "We have received troubling news," she said. A holographic projection appeared above the table, displaying a vast network of trade routes across the Xilari Empire. One of them pulsed red. "The supply lines leading to the outer colonies have been disrupted," one of the advisors said. "Multiple shipments have vanished without a trace." Joran frowned. "Pirates." A noble scoffed. "Pirates do not make entire convoys disappear. This is something else." Another noble leaned forward. "It could be an internal betrayal. Someone in the Empire may be working against us." Vailana's expression remained unreadable. "We must know the truth before we act." "Joran, what do you think?" All eyes turned to him. The tension in the room was thick. If he said the wrong thing, it could cost him everything. Joran studied the map. If the enemy had simply attacked the convoys, there would be wreckage. But these ships had vanished. Someone isn't just attacking. They're taking, Joran said. That means they have a base. They aren't destroying the convoys, they're stealing them. A murmur spread through the council. The nobles exchanged uncertain looks. The Empress gave a small nod. Continue. Joran pointed to a nearby asteroid field on the map. If I were hiding a stolen fleet, I'd need a place big enough to keep it hidden. This sector has plenty of places where someone could build a secret outpost. The same noble from before scoffed. And how do you suggest we find them? That region is massive. Joran thought for a moment. Then, an idea struck him. Bait. The room went silent. Joran turned to the Empress. Send a fake convoy. Let them think they're attacking another shipment. But this time, have a hidden strike team on board, ready to track them back to their base. Velana's lips curved into a small smile. A trap. Joran nodded. If we catch them in the act, we'll know exactly who they are and where they're hiding. The Empress looked around the room. Does anyone have a better plan? No one spoke. Finally, one of the older advisors nodded. It is a sound strategy, Empress. Velana leaned back, her gaze settling on Joran. Then it shall be done. Joran let out a slow breath. He had just convinced the most powerful rulers in the Empire to use his idea. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The trap was set. A massive transport ship, filled with valuable cargo, left the palace docks. To anyone watching, it looked like a normal supply run. But hidden inside the cargo containers were elite Siluri soldiers, armed and ready. Small tracking devices were placed throughout the ship, designed to activate the moment they were boarded. Joran watched from the command center alongside Empress Velana. The holographic screen showed the ship's progress as it moved through space. Minutes passed, then hours. Then, an alert flashed red. Contact. A auxiliary officer reported. Unidentified vessels are approaching the transport. Joran's heart pounded. Are they making a move? Affirmative, the officer said. They're surrounding the transport. The next few seconds felt like an eternity. Then, they're boarding. Velana's golden eyes gleamed. Activate the trackers. A command was sent. The hidden devices inside the transport activated, sending out signals. Joran held his breath. If their plan worked, the stolen ship would lead them straight to the enemy's hideout. Seconds later, a new set of coordinates appeared on the screen. A hidden base deep within the asteroid field. Joran grinned. We got them. Velana turned to her officers. Prepare an assault force. We end this now. Hours later, the auxiliary fleet arrived at the enemy stronghold. Joran stood on the observation deck, watching as the Empress's warships surrounded the hidden base. The enemy had nowhere to run. Velana gave a single command. Attack. Siluri strike teams launched from their ships, swarming the asteroid base. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as the enemy tried to fight back. But they were outmatched. Within minutes, the battle was over. The base was secured. Captured enemy soldiers were brought before the Empress. Joran watched as her gaze settled on their leader, Auxiliary with a scared face and cold eyes. Who do you serve? Velana demanded. The prisoner smirked. You already know the answer, Empress. Joran's stomach tightened. This wasn't just random piracy. This was something bigger. Velana studied the prisoner for a long moment. Then she turned to Joran. You were right, she said. This was never about simple raids. There are forces moving in the shadows. Joran swallowed hard. He had helped win this battle, but he could feel it. This was just the beginning of something much larger. The Empress looked at him, her expression unreadable. You continue to surprise me, human. Joran took a slow breath. He wasn't just an advisor anymore. He was now a key player in a much larger game. And whatever was coming next, he had a feeling it would change everything. The battle was won. Joran stood beside Empress Velana in the command chamber, watching as captured prisoners were escorted away by auxiliary guards. The enemy's secret base had been destroyed, their stolen ships reclaimed. But something felt wrong. Joran had expected pirates, mercenaries, criminals working for their own profit. But these enemies had fought with precision and discipline. They weren't ordinary raiders. They were soldiers. And the smirk on the captured leader's face told Joran that the real battle had yet to begin. Later, in the palace interrogation chamber, the enemy leader sat restrained in a hovering energy field. His scarred face showed no fear, only amusement. Velana stepped forward, her golden eyes cold. "Who do you work for?" The prisoner chuckled. "You already know, Empress." Velana's expression didn't change. "Tell me." The prisoner tilted his head. "The council has grown tired of your rule." Joran frowned. "The council." The Empress glanced at him. "A faction within the Empire's elite. They believe I have strayed too far from tradition." Joran's mind raced. "You mean because you're trying to change things? Because you didn't just crush the raiders with brute force?" The prisoner let out a low laugh. "Because she has grown weak," he said, "seeking advice from a human, listening to outsiders. That is not the way of the Xilari." Velana's gaze hardened. "And so they sent you to disrupt my empire." The prisoner grinned. "Oh, Empress, this is only the beginning." Joran's stomach twisted. Velana studied the prisoner for a long moment. Then she turned to her guards. "Take him away. I will deal with him later." As the prisoner was dragged from the chamber, Joran looked at the Empress. This wasn't just an attack. This was a message. Velana nodded. "Yes, and now we must answer." Joran walked through the palace corridors, deep in thought. If there were people within the Xilari Empire working against the Empress, then they weren't just facing an external threat. The danger was inside the palace itself. He turned a corner and nearly ran into a familiar figure. Commander Xalvik, the Empress's top military officer. The tall Xilari warrior looked down at Joran with sharp eyes. "You are making powerful enemies, human." Joran folded his arms. "I noticed." Xalvik studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Come with me." Joran hesitated but followed. The commander led him into a private chamber, away from listening ears. A map of the Xilari Empire glowed on a screen, showing regions controlled by different factions. Xalvik pointed to several marked locations. "These are places where the Council's influence is strongest. They control key industries, supply routes, and even members of the military." Joran frowned. "So they've been planning this for a while." Xalvik nodded. "They are not fools. They know they cannot challenge the Empress openly, so they strike from the shadows." Joran studied the map. "What's their next move?" Xalvik's face darkened. "If they truly wish to challenge the Empress, they will not stop at sabotage. They will try to remove her." Joran felt a chill. "You mean assassination?" Xalvik said grimly. Joran wasted no time. He rushed back to the Empress's chambers, his heart pounding. If there was a plot against Velana, she needed to know immediately. The palace was quiet, too quiet. As he approached her chamber doors, 2 guards stood at attention, but something about them felt off. Joran's instincts screamed at him. He slowed his steps, scanning the guards carefully. Their armor was correct, their weapons standard, but their stance was wrong. They weren't palace guards. They were imposters. Joran acted without thinking. He lunged forward, grabbing the nearest guard's weapon and twisting it out of his hands. The other reached for his blade, but Joran drove his elbow into the alien's chest, knocking him back. The first guard recovered quickly, pulling a hidden blade from his sleeve. But before he could strike, a blinding energy blast shot through the air. The guard collapsed, a smoking wound in his chest. Joran turned to see Velana standing in the doorway, a sleek energy pistol in her hand. Her golden eyes burned with cold fury. Joran caught his breath. "I was just coming to warn you." The Empress lowered her weapon. "It seems you were right on time." More real guards rushed down the corridor, alerted by the noise. They secured the unconscious attacker while Velana stepped closer to Joran. "You suspected them," she said. Joran nodded. They were too stiff. Their posture was wrong. Velana studied him for a moment, then smiled slightly. You continue to surprise me, human. Joran exhaled, tension still gripping his chest. This was just the first attempt. If the council is behind this, they won't stop. Velana's expression darkened. No, they will not. She turned to her guards. Prepare the palace for lockdown, and bring me every name connected to the council's influence. Joran watched as the Empress took control, issuing orders with calm authority. She wasn't afraid. She was angry. And for the first time, Joran saw just how dangerous Velana could be when provoked. Later that night, Joran stood on one of the palace balconies, looking out at the alien city below. Lights stretched across the horizon, a reminder of the vast empire now teetering on the edge of civil war. The Empress joined him, her gaze fixed on the stars. The council will not stop until they win, Joran said. Velana nodded. Then we must make sure they lose. Joran turned to her. How? Velana's golden eyes gleamed. By doing what they fear most. She looked at him directly. By changing the empire forever. Joran felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about revolution. And somehow, he had become a part of it. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back. Joran stood on the palace balcony, looking at the vast alien city stretching before him. He had arrived as a simple servant, unnoticed and unimportant. Now he was standing beside the most powerful ruler in the auxiliary empire, Empress Velana. But the empire was on the edge of chaos. The council, a faction of powerful nobles, had secretly worked against the Empress, trying to weaken her rule. They had sabotaged trade routes, stolen ships, and even attempted to assassinate her. And now, the Empress had decided. She would not just fight back. She would change the empire forever. Inside the war chamber, Joran stood beside Velana as auxiliary commanders gathered around a massive holographic display. Maps of the empire glowed in the air, marking regions controlled by the council's allies. Velana's golden eyes swept over her advisors. The time for waiting is over. We strike now. One of the generals, an older auxiliary with dark blue skin, hesitated. Empress, if we move too quickly, the council may rally more support. They still hold influence over many noble houses. Velana's voice was calm but firm. If we allow them to gather strength, we will lose the chance to end this war before it begins. Joran studied the map. They control key supply lines. If we can cut off their resources, their power will collapse. The general frowned. That would require precision strikes in multiple locations at once. Velana nodded. And that is exactly what we will do. She turned to Joran. You know how humans fight wars. Your people do not always rely on brute strength. Tell me, how would you defeat an enemy like this? Joran thought for a moment. He had never been a soldier, but he understood strategy. The council expects you to act like an empress, to command your armies from a distance and wait for results. He pointed to the map. But what if you did the opposite? Velana raised an eyebrow. Explain. Joran took a deep breath. Go to the battlefield yourself. Lead the first attack in person. Show the nobles that you are the empire. A murmur spread through the room. One of the advisors shook his head. That is reckless. An empress does not fight like a soldier. Velana looked at Joran. And yet, this is exactly what the council would never expect. Silence filled the chamber. Then, the Empress smiled. It is decided. The attack began at dawn. The Empress's fleet moved swiftly, striking deep into council-controlled territory. The first target was a massive space station, where the council stored supplies for their forces. Joran stood on the bridge of the Empress's flagship, watching as auxiliary warships surrounded the station. A transmission flickered to life. A auxiliary noble appeared on the screen, his face twisted in anger. You dare attack us, Empress. This is treason. Velana's golden eyes burned. You are the traitors. She raised her hand. Fire. A beam of energy shot from the flagship, hitting the enemy station's shields. Explosions erupted across its surface as Silari soldiers stormed inside, securing the base within minutes. Joran let out a breath. The battle was swift, decisive. The council had not been prepared. One strike down, more to go. Over the next few days, the Empress's forces moved through the empire, striking at key locations. Each battle sent a clear message. The Empress was not hiding in her palace. She was leading the fight. Noble houses that had once hesitated now pledged loyalty to her. The council's power weakened with every victory. But Joran knew the war wasn't over yet. The council had one last stronghold, an ancient fortress on a distant moon. If they were not stopped there, they could still regroup and fight back. Velana turned to Joran. This is the final battle. Joran nodded. Then we make sure it ends today. The fortress loomed before them, surrounded by energy shields and heavy cannons. Joran stood beside Velana on the battlefield, feeling the heat of explosions in the distance. He had never been in a real war before, but he wasn't afraid. The Empress raised her sword high. Advance. Silari warriors charged forward, pushing through enemy lines. Lasers flashed, smoke filled the air, but Joran kept moving. He stayed close to Velana, protecting her flank. The battle raged on for hours. Then, finally, the fortress's defenses began to collapse. Joran and Velana fought their way inside, reaching the council's last remaining leaders. The nobles stood in defiance, but they knew they had lost. Velana stepped forward. The war is over. One of the nobles sneered. You have won today, but your rule will never last. You are breaking the old ways. The Empress's gaze was steady. The old ways kept us weak. The empire must change. She turned to her soldiers. Take them away. As the captured nobles were led out, Joran let out a long breath. It was over. The Empress had won. Days later, back in the palace, Joran stood beside Velana as she addressed the people. The Silari Empire has stood for centuries. But today, we take our first step into a new future, she declared. No longer will we be ruled by fear and corruption. Strength is not just power. It is wisdom, unity, and the courage to change. Cheers erupted across the capital. Joran turned to Velana. You did it. The Empress smiled. We did it. She studied him for a moment, then took a step closer. You have been more than an advisor, Joran. You have been by my side in every battle. And now, her golden eyes softened. I would have you by my side always. Joran's heart pounded. Are you saying? Velana gave a small smile. Stay, not as a servant, not even as an advisor, but as my consort. Joran stared at her, stunned. He had been taken as a lowly servant. He had fought against powerful enemies. And now, the ruler of an entire empire was offering him a place beside her. Slowly, he smiled. I would be honored. The Empress took his hand. Together, they turned to face the future. The Silari Empire had changed, and so had Joran's life. Forever.